Okay, well, I guess we'll go ahead and get started. I think we have enough to have a quorum. So I'm going to call the meeting to order at 6:03. And let me go ahead and call the roll. We have Kristen.
Here.
Irene.
Here.
Sabrina. I see Sabrina's name. We're going to call her here.
Oh, I'm here.
Oh,
Yeah.
good. Thank you. Okay. Vanessa.
Here.
Katie.
Here.
See, I believe Mary Jo is going to be absent tonight. Jim.
Here.
Greg.
Sorry, John, I was on mute. I'm here.
Okay. Angie. Not see Angie. Joe.
Here.
Mona.
Here.
Kate.
Is that me, Kate, or a different Kate?
Oh, that's you, Kate. Sorry.
Okay.
You're here. Hey, Rich.
Here.
John, did you call Barrett?
No, I skipped Barrett, but I believe Barrett's going to be absent tonight.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
Yep. Yeah, he's I think he's sitting in an airport right now, from what I understand. So, yeah, thanks for bringing it out, though. Let's see, I think Sandy is here at least in the beginning. And Jenny.
Hi, I'm here.
Yep. Leela.
Here.
Jessica.
I'm here.
And Director Graziano.
I am here as well.
Yep. I believe Director Shanto Shore is not going to be here tonight.
No, she will not be in attendance tonight. Correct.
Okay. See, then we also have a visitor with us, Jason Simmons.
Good evening, I'm here.
Great. Okay. We will move to the public participation protocol statement. So before we get started, we would like to welcome any additional community members joining us today. Our goal is to encourage continued public involvement and knowledge sharing with fellow community members. However, in order to respect the time of our MBOC committee volunteers, we ask that non-members please hold any comments and questions for the public comment portion of our agenda will occur at the end of the meeting. Okay. So we now move to the approval of the minutes. See, and I had a couple of corrections on there. See, Irene, am I correct in believing you were absent at the last meeting?
Trying to remember.
Or were you here?
I thought I was here. I was just having issues with my video and stuff.
Ah, okay. What could be that? Okay, we will leave you here then. That's my mistake on that. And then Barrett Roth, I'll find him marked as absent. But, yeah, he's appearing both in the present and absent. So I think we need to take Barrett Roth off of the present for the last meeting. Are there any other changes or questions about the minutes?
This is Joe, move approval.
Okay. Is there a second?
Hey, second, this is Irene.
Okay, let me go down the roll. Kristen?
Approve.
Irene?
Approved.
Sabrina?
Aye.
John is an aye. Vanessa?
I approve.
Katie?
Approve.
Jim,
Approve.
Greg,
Approve.
see, and Mona, you were not a member at the last one. So I'm going to go ahead and put you down as abstaining, if that's okay with you.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay. Okay, the motion passes. Okay, so we'll move on to membership. Okay, so Joe,
Okay, just about three things. First off, I'd like to introduce for her first official meeting, Mona Rowhouse. Mona, we're glad you're with us. She's our student representative on our committee. Mona, is there anything you want to say to the group?
Just that I'm happy to be an official member and I'm excited to work with you all for the coming year.
Thank you. Well, we're glad you're with us, so we'll look forward to working with you also.
Mona, mind if I ask what school you go to?
Oh, go ahead.
Douglas County High School.
Awesome. Right on. Thanks.
What grade, Mona?
I'm going to be a junior next year.
Junior? Okay. Any interest in majors or what are you specializing in?
Well, I'm not quite sure specifically what I want to major in after high school, but I'm thinking something like international relations, maybe public policy, something in that realm.
Okay, good. Excellent. Very good. Any other questions for Mona?
just
Okay.
welcome.
Second item, on June 21st, John did receive a letter of resignation from Kara McLean. She's one of our parent community members from the region, Highlands Ranch region. So that will give us an opening that we were, again, not expecting at that point. John has taken care of, and Jenny has taken care of. It's already posted on the website, and communication department's aware of what's going on there. So that's another opening we have, which gives us three openings. Kara's would be one. We do have the safety and security position still open, and the licensed educator secondary are still open. So, John, any comments you want to make on any of those three?
Well, on the, the two of them have been open for quite some time now, the safety and security and the educator secondary. I did get a little bit of a bite on the educator secondary. I did get an email from one of the district staff about that, but unfortunately, so far he is, to my knowledge, he's not actually applied.
Okay.
So that's still open. I know, for some time now, I've been asking both Rich and Anthony if the MBOC can take a more direct lead in recruiting. And generally speaking, the response comes back that the staff would like to handle that. Which is fine. I have no problem at all with staff doing that. So, but I think after this length of time, I think the more angles we approach this at, the better off we're going to be. So would there be a problem, Rich and Director Graziano, if the MBOC took a more of a lead on this and tried to find some people?
And when you say lead, I would imagine you just mean word of mouth and contacts that you have, correct? Or is there some other?
Well, I'd like for the safety and security position, we can call the Douglas County Sheriff's Office. We can call the Lone Tree Police. I'm not sure if there's other police agencies in Douglas County, but we can talk to their communications people and see if they have any ideas. Yes, then like kind of word of mouth and just seeing what we can dredge up.
Rich, I mean, again, if however we do that, I mean, I don't know if we're connecting with a lot of those groups trying to do what you're describing. So that would be my first comment is I don't know if that we're probably doing some of those things already.
Yes. So Director, thanks. And John, thanks for the question. So our Director of Safety Security has been reaching out to law enforcement, but I think staff's only request would be any communications to go out through our communications department, but certainly any word of mouth or any request via email from the MBOC to any other public entity, I think is fine. Director, unless you have any other thoughts. We've been putting it on every blast that we can. And unfortunately, we've not received any responses. And internally, we've been asking our school leadership, through all of our internal communications, principal notes, as well as email and word of mouth, to request a member. So we'll continue that. But Director, unless you feel otherwise,
I don't know.
I think all the help would be great.
Sure. Go for it, John.
Okay, well, thank you.
That's it for my report, John.
Okay, well, thank you, Joe. Okay, so we will move on to the election of officers. So we need to elect our chair and vice chair for the upcoming year. And I'm certainly interested in running, and I believe Vanessa is interested in running. Is there anyone else that's interested in running in either of those two positions?
I think you guys have been doing a great job. And thank you for being willing to do it, because I know it's a lot of work.
Okay, well, thank you. Okay, well, hearing no other nominations, I'll entertain a motion on this.
This is Irene, I motion.
I'll second.
Irene, are you making a motion for both me to
Yes,
be the
I'm
chair
making a
and-
motion for both of you to rerun or to be accepted again or elected again for the chair and co-chair position.
Okay. Okay.
And I'll second both of those.
Okay. Okay, well, let me go down the roll. So Kristen,
Aye.
Irene,
Aye.
Sabrina,
Aye.
and I'm going to abstain since it involves me. Vanessa,
I'll do the same.
okay. Katie,
Aye.
Jim,
Yes.
Greg,
Yes.
Joe,
Yes,
Mona.
Yeah.
Okay, well, that passes. Thank you very much. I appreciate everybody's support, and hopefully we'll have another good year. Okay, so now we will move on to the review of the 2019 general obligation bond transaction. And I'll turn that over to Jason Simmons.
Great. Good evening, everybody. Can everybody hear me okay?
You're good, Jason.
Yes.
Yes.
And I'm going to share my screen. It's like Jenny gave me ability to do that. Okay, so can everybody see the presentation that I have up?
Yep.
yep.
Yes.
Great. And feel free to jump in and ask any questions along the way. Again, my name is Jason Simmons. I work for Hilltop Securities, and we serve as the district's municipal advisor. In that role, we have assisted the district with the issuance and planning and issuance of the Series 2019 general obligation bonds. That included doing some work on the ballot questions leading up to the ballot measure placed on the ballot in 2018. And then we did sell the bonds in early 2019. So in November of 2018, the district received authorization to issue $249,975,000 of general obligation bonds. As part of that ballot authorization, as part of Tabor, you have to put two key ballot parameters on the ballot. One is a total repayment amount, and then the other is a maximum annual repayment amount. And again, both of those requirements are part of Tabor. So any election that has debt issuance in Colorado has those two parameters in there. When we are assisting our clients in putting those parameters together for a ballot measure, there are several factors that we consider to make sure that they provide enough flexibility to accommodate different market conditions and make sure that our clients have the ability to issue all of the par amount that was authorized at that election. So the first is timing of the issuances. Depends on the market, depends on the construction drawdown schedule. Some of our school district clients plan to just issue all of the bonds that are authorized at one point in time. Some of them plan to issue them in multiple issuances, maybe one pretty quickly after the election, and then maybe one 2 or 3 years down the road. Again, depends on the projects that are being financed and constructed and how fast those projects can be rolled out. Another is we want to make sure we're accommodating changes in interest rates. We have obviously been in a very low interest rate environment for many years, but we do want to make sure that we allow for some fluctuations in interest rates. There have been periods of time where interest rates do increase pretty substantially. And we want to make sure that, again, because we have those total repayment parameters in there, you want to make sure that they can accommodate any change in interest rate before those bonds are issued from the time of the election. And then the other is the debt service structure. We look at, when we're looking at a district's financial position as far as their debt structure, we do take a look at outstanding bonds. We look at how this new debt service is going to layer on in aggregate on top of any existing debt and how that impacts a potential mill levy that will be needed to be imposed to pay for the debt service. So those are the factors that we take a look at when we are putting the ballot parameters together. So again, the ultimate, goal of this is to provide flexibility. We want to make sure that these are large enough and flexible enough to make sure that in this case, that Douglas County School District had the ability to make sure they could issue all $249,975 million of bonds. So as I mentioned earlier, the bond election was in 2018. We did turn around and sell those bonds in January 29th of 2019. The bonds, what we thought was a very favorable market environment then, resulted in true interest cost. So a true interest cost, for those of you who are in the financial world, is essentially an internal rate of return, discounted cash flow kind of calculation. So the ultimate true borrowing cost for the district was 3.07. The bonds had a 20-year final maturity. The final structure resulted in a total repayment amount that was about $10 million less than the ballot parameter. Again, the ballot parameter is $399 million of a total repayment. The total repayment came in at about 388. The market dynamic, as I've said earlier, we've been in such a low interest rate environment for a long time. The market demand would prefer higher interest rates or higher coupon payments on those bonds. Given their demand for higher coupon payments and the low yields in the market at the time, the market dynamic created bond premium. District generated about $290 million on top of the 250-ish of par amount that was sold that day. If the district were to turn around and issue essentially that $290 million, if that was par, and we sold it in a par environment, $390 million. So if it would have been about the same result of what we ended up with at about 388 if we essentially just turned around and sold $290 million of par at par bonds versus $250 million with some premium out there due to the market constraints. And the market, again, when we are selling bonds through negotiated sales as we use with the school district, we tend to use an interest rate or a coupon structure that generates the broadest investor demand. We want to make sure that there is sufficient demand, especially for the size. Again, it was $250 million. We want to make sure that there is sufficient investor demand out there to make sure that all those bonds are sold.
Jason,
I'm sorry, I'm not moving my.
Can I ask a question real quick?
Please, yeah.
Before you move on, just because I don't know if everyone else understands how this all works, but if the voters only approved the $249,975, but we were able to generate 290, and that's because of the premium, but can you just kind of elaborate why there's that big differential as far as what you actually received in proceeds compared to what the voters approved, to issue? Because I understand that the par amount didn't change, so that's what we're repaying. But I just think with that gap, for people who might not do bond issuances, can you explain that?
Yes. So that does get into a little bit of bond math. There are really two aspects of the bond math equation. One is the interest rate or the coupon payment that is being paid by a municipal issuer. And so in this case, right now, or at the time we sold those bonds, the market coupon demand that generated the broadest interest was a 5% rate. So if you looked at the bonds, the interest payments and the principal payments that the district is paying right now, they're essentially paying the cash flows based on a 5% coupon rate. The yield environment is so low, and when you have a disconnect between the coupon, which is demanded by the investors, and the yields were significantly lower than that. Then you have what's called a premium bond. And so essentially the district is generating, for every $1,000 of par amount of the bonds that are being sold, the district's generating some premium on top of that. And that's generated by the fact that the interest rate, the coupon by the district, is higher than the actual yield. So even though if you looked at the bond issuance that you sold, most of those coupons are in the 5, there were some 4s in there. As I was going back to say, the TIC, the rate or the yield that the district is paying is just over 3%. And so that's the difference there that generates bond premium. And that has really been a very consistent theme really since the early 2000s, when we really entered into this very low interest rate environment. The market, again, since that time frame, has investors really prefer 5% coupons. Right now, I just looked at it earlier. When we sold your bonds in early 2019, interest rates are actually significantly lower now than they were then. Now that investor coupon shifted even down to about a 4% because, again, we get into some dollar price considerations there. But up until really 2 or 3 months ago, the investor demand has really been for 5% coupons. And again, with the yield so low, that's what generates the bond premium, is when you have a higher coupon rate that's being paid by the issuer and then the yield being earned by the investor.
So Jason, this is Jim Morris. I'd like to ask a couple regarding this issue as well. So is it fair to say that the intent of the bond language was to sell $209,975,000 worth of debt?
That was the par amount of the issue based on the projects, that
was the language that was on the bond language that was presented to the voters. So the intent of the bond language was to sell that amount. As you listed in your presentation, where you had the subtitles of the total payment amounts and the total annual debt service limits. So those limits, as you explained, are put in there to allow flexibility. So if something changed in the market, then you would still have the ability, the district would, to issue debt and still make the $249,975. I think that's pretty common in the bond issuances, and I don't know that anybody has trouble with that. I think the issue that I see is it looks like once the bond was approved and then you had this total debt limit and you had an annual payment limit, and it looks to me like you reverse engineered the bond amount so that you could get an extra $38 million, which the voters did not approve. And you also set an interest rate at 5%, which was above the market at the time. And I don't think you got a 20-year bond either. So the bond vote was for a 20-year bond at current market rates at $249,975. If we'd have sold the $249,975 at 3% or whatever the market was at the time, the annual payments would be half of what the annual debt payment limit is. And this is the issue that I raised at prior MBOC meetings, is the bond premium was great for the investors because they got a 5% bond. The bond premium was great for the district because they got $38 million extra dollars that the voters never approved. The only ones that got the short end of the stick in this deal is the taxpayers, who have to repay this bond at 5% over less than 20 years when it should have been at 3%.
I'm not sure if there was a question in there. I mean, as I was saying, what we did at the time was we put together a bond issuance that was based on the par amount that was authorized by the district and the market conditions and demand for investors at the time. And that was our direction from the district, was to do that, was to structure a bond issue that had the broadest market acceptance at the time of issuance and sell all of the par amount that was authorized by voters at the 2018 election.
So there was no bonds being sold at 3% at the time.
You know, every transaction is different. There are some that are, there are some that are not. It kind of depends on the goals of the overall transaction.
Well, that's my question here is, did you reverse engineer this to maximize the annual debt service and the total debt service to get the maximum amount of bond premium, which the voters never approved in this district?
No, we don't reverse engineer anything. We sell bonds based on the par amount and the market conditions at the time that help the district, our clients achieve their goals.
Well, I'll just disagree with you on that. That was not market conditions at the time. The market conditions at the time are what the true interest rate is on this bond, which was 3%.
If I can, I'd like to go to my last slide here, which shows some other comparable school district issuances that were in the market at the time. That shows Douglas County School District received the premium on their bonds was about 15%, 16%. In the table below, we have some other examples of other school district bond issues that were priced in that general time frame. And you can see that the market supported in that situation a range for 15 to 20% of bond premium. This is a selection of school districts. We thought that was the most comparable. But I can show you, again, a number of transactions that are in that range given this low interest rate environment of which we are operating in. So it is, again, there are different times where issuers issue bonds with lower coupon rates, but again, your true interest cost that you're borrowing was that 3.07. And that was calculated that way based on the coupons and the par.
The rate on the bonds is 5%. So we're repaying that debt based on a 5% interest rate, not 3%. The whole bond premium is a different topic that you guys set this up to maximize the premium. That is not the interest rate on the bonds. If the tax,
I'm not saying, I agree with you. The 5% is the interest rate. That there's a 5s and there's some 4s and there's a 2 in there. That's the interest rate. That's what I've said from the first pin, is that is correct.
so why did we not go 20 years to maximize the debt repayment?
The final maturity on these bonds was 2041.
Well, if your annual debt service that you show, and by the total payment amount, unless you're fluctuating the annual payments.
Actually, the final maturity was 2038, 12/15 of 2038. So that was the final payment of these bonds. The final maturity of these bonds is December 15th of 2038.
Okay, so on your second slide, I believe, so where it has the final results, and it's got the maximum annual debt service and the 34,436,600.
Mm-hmm.
So now, is that the actual yearly payment that the district is making?
No, that is not. That is the maximum. The debt service on the 2019 bonds was not level. It changes it fluctuates, because what we did was ultimately we wanted to level out your debt service of the district as much as possible. So that actual year, that maximum of 34,436 occurs in 2028. It fluctuates a little bit after that. After 2028, the debt service levels off at 17.3 million a year. But we look at it in aggregate for your aggregate debt service of the district.
So what does it start off being?
It started at about 12 and then jumped up for a few years and then came back down.
Okay. So is it ever going to exceed that amount?
No, it's fixed. Your debt service is fixed.
Well, if it's fixed, how can it jump around?
Well, the debt service schedule, can you see this screen I have up now?
Okay.
So this was the debt service. It's fixed, meaning these amounts won't change. So this debt service structure, we look at it in conjunction with the outstanding bonds of the district at the time. And I don't think this has a schedule with your other bonds. But so this debt service won't change. So we structured it at a level to get to, I don't have that off the top of my head, I'd have to open that file. But again, you can see it kind of leveled in at a level debt service to these certain years, and then it dropped off in 2029 to 17 million. And that, we looked at the aggregate debt service of the district at the time.
Okay. Is it possible for us to get a copy of that?
Yeah, it's in your, I can open up what is called your official statement. It's the public document that is out there. And I can show it to you, and I can send you a link. It's on a website called EMA, which is monitored by the Municipal Securities Rulemaking Board. And it is a
if you can send that link to Jenny, and then Jenny, if you could send that out to us, I would appreciate it.
So here's, as you can see now, here's your official statement. Here's your debt service structure. This is the 2019 bonds. Here are your old bonds. And then we created this structure over here to allow for step downs in debt service over a number of years.
Jason, this is Jim Morris again. So when the bond sold, were you guys involved in the sale as well, or was someone else doing that?
We are your advisor. Yes, we were. There was an underwriter whose firm is RBC. We, in conjunction with the underwriter, to help the district accomplish its goals. And we had numerous conversations with district administration staff leading up to the bond issuance.
So did they, so was it sold in bits and pieces, or did it go out in one chunk?
We always sell bonds on one chunk, on like at one time, on one order period, on one day.
And then, so does Hilltop Securities have any kind of relationship with the underwriters or the people?
Nope.
Bond?
We have a fiduciary duty to our clients to execute a transaction that is in the best interest of the clients, given the directions that we have. We have no relationship with the underwriter. We have no relationship with the investors. Our compensation is not based on any premium generated or not generated.
Thank you.
Hey, Jason.
Yes.
Hey, Greg Miner. Appreciate you taking a bunch of heated questions, and probably not so intentionally, just people are trying to understand, right? But I think this is a little bit of a byproduct of what you get when you put a ballot measure out there to the general public that says, hey, we're going to issue $250 million of debt. Hey, the repayment cost is going to be $400 million. Hey, taxes are going to be, none of those people are going to calculate an internal rate of return. Nobody really understands bond issuance, whether or not it's going to be oversubscribed and what happens to that money if it is oversubscribed. So it is what it is. And frankly, I'm not surprised at all. The language is vague. Nobody tells you what the bond rate is going to be, what the market is, whether or not they're going to be priced above or below par, whether or not there's going to be oversubscription, we're going to raise extra money. My question to the district, and would just be in the meeting notes, would be, okay, so the bond was oversubscribed, we raised extra money. Is the district's opinion that that extra money is spent in accordance with the bond language, the ballot language, or is that extra money that fell into the coffers of who knows where, right? That would be not my question for you, Jason, because I think you understand exactly what transpired here and it went down according exactly to the ballot. But my question to the district would be, hey, if the bond was oversubscribed and we raised extra money, did that money fall into the prescription of what the ballot language was? And is that how the district is going to spend it?
So this is Kate. Rich, feel free to chime in as well. With the generation of premium, we absolutely did continue to follow the ballot language in terms of how funds needed to be spent. What it allowed us to do was move farther down into our list of tier 2 projects. Rich, do you want to clarify any of that in addition?
Well, not only that, but to address any cost overruns, like some of the other local districts who simply don't perform some of the urgent projects because of cost escalations, market conditions, price of commodities, deliveries, things like that. We have used premium, and you'll see this later on in the presentation. Right now, we're forecasting using 10 of the 15 million just on tier 1 and tier 2. Just tier 1 at neighborhood and charter schools that were on the flyers and briefed to the public. So, and then the other 4.9 million, that's part of your presentation for reallocation of funds, but all of that is in accordance with the bond language, either for additional tier 1 projects or for other capital needs, and that's on the presentation.
Yeah, so again, hey, thanks Rich and thanks Kate. So again, it's what the voters approved in the ballot. It raised 250 million. The repayment cost is no more than 399 million. The taxes are no more than $340 million a year. And that's what the voters approved. And you guys structured it well, sold it well. Demand was high. We got extra money. Nobody can say that wasn't in line with exactly what the ballot said, right?
Rich, can I ask a clarifying question? You mentioned using the premium for tier 1. Was that for higher cost of tier 1 projects?
Several reasons: higher cost, as well as additional tier 1s that were discovered that needed to be addressed.
But weren't all the tier 1s already established prior to even going to the voters? And weren't all the tier 1 already funded? That's where I'm confused. I thought all of tier 1s were already funded.
So the tier 1s were identified in the master capital plan. That's a programming document. Once we have funds for design and construction, we have the designers, the architects, and their subconsultant engineers. We have the construction management general contractors. We have operations and maintenance. We have the school principal, the school advisability, the advisory council, and we validate the actual conditions of those programmed identified tier 1s that have been stated as needed. So for example, fire alarm projects, perhaps the entire system doesn't need to be replaced, only the heads and devices. Mechanical systems, sometimes when we are doing a mechanical controls project, we identify that certain mechanical rooftop units also have to be done, or certain coils or engines, motors in those units. Certain ductwork may have to be addressed as well. So sometimes not only did we have increased costs, which was real, but we also had increased scope. So in order to fix X, you had some ancillary work that needed to be addressed to make X work. In other cases, you would go out and because something was on life cycle, you would evaluate it, for example, some generator, and it was determined, no, even though it was on the list to be replaced, it in fact is performing well, is maintainable, and doesn't have to be replaced. So those come back to the bond bottom line to address other tier 1 needs. We have funded tier 1 with the help of bond premium. Tier 2 is a set amount that was 50% by funding at each school. And that's what we designed to and contracted per budget. But tier 1, we wanted to make sure that we were not shortchanging and not doing any tier 1. So that was the purpose of the bond premium. So it's a difference in the master capital plan, which is not a bond plan. A master capital plan based on the capital improvement plan, which is one of the attachments, that is a pre-design planning estimate. We have not had funds to have a designer or engineer out there and contractor to validate the condition. So for example, every so many years, you may have it on your replacement list for your house to replace your water heater. Some water heaters fail earlier, some last longer. So it depends on the actual condition. Same with your roof, for example. There's life cycles that trigger certain projects being in the master capital plan, but the bond, once we have a detailed team, actually confirms the actual condition. And so prices escalate. Some prices, for example, roofs actually went down, but most of the other prices went up. And then when we got in there, opened up a wall, you had unforeseen site conditions, or you had ancillary equipment to that tier 1 project that needed to be addressed.
So and I'm just trying to understand. So if we didn't have that premium money, how would we fund those additional tier 1 costs?
There's a likelihood you wouldn't do them all. Or you would reduce the amount of tier 2 you're doing in order to do all the tier 1. Or you would reduce the district-wide initiatives, support facilities, athletics, things like that to meet your most urgent needs, which really in this bond for capital renewal, it's those identified tier 1 needs.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but don't we have some contingencies for some of those things?
The contingencies are built into the project estimates in the capital improvement plan.
Okay.
On
But
a line by
not
line
bond
basis.
money. But it is bond money or it's not bond money?
All of the expenditures we're discussing is bond money.
Okay.
When we design, we have contingency built in the design. Even before that, when we plan, we have contingency built in. When we have guaranteed maximum prices from our contractors, we have contractors contingency as well as owners contingency. We have to approve, I personally have to approve every change order in this bond, and any amount of contingency, either contractor or owners, comes back to the bottom line. And that's something you will see in one of the attachments that our owner's rep NV5 has put together for the forecast for the bond premium. It shows what we are forecasting getting back from project contingencies year by year as savings, and the reallocation of those funds for additional projects.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
I have a follow-up question while you have this screen on. With the total column that shows our total payments per year on principal and interest, I'm assuming that then is what you determine the mill levy that gets assessed to pay back that on a yearly basis. This is just more, it struck my curiosity seeing this now. I've never seen this much detail on the bonds. Is the district levying a mill levy each year that stays steady, that then pays back all these? Or are you fluctuating it every year based on what the yearly payments are? Or is it staying consistent so that it ultimately pays back the $388 million?
Sorry, we are looking at the mill levy rates as a function of this, as well as assessed valuation. So how much is the value of our community that we can mill against?
So it does fluctuate. The repayment of the debt service will fluctuate from year to year based on those two factors.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Kind of a follow up on that. Is it possible, Kate, for you to break out the current mills and tell us how many mills are being paid on each bond?
Give me 1 minute.
Because like for instance, I'm paying 8.054 mils. I have no idea how much goes toward a given bond.
Actually, John, if you're looking at it for an individual bond issue, that might take me more time. I've got the total mill rates that we pass every December.
Okay, well, if you can look at that and then send me if you can kind of break it out. So how many mills are we paying for the 2018 bond? And how many mills are we paying for another bond? And so forth.
We'll send that as well, John.
Okay, well, thank you. Okay, are there any more questions, comments on this topic? Okay, well, thank you very much, Jason, for being here. We appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you for the interest.
Yep.
Thank you, Jason.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Okay, so we will move on to the status of the bond. And on that, in talking with several of the MBOC members, I've kind of gotten the impression that I don't think we're all on the same page, when it comes to the bond expenses. And I'm including both the members on the committee and staff, and I'm saying we're all not on the same page. And like specifically, I've heard that there are concerns about how the Tier 1 projects are selected to be included in the bond, and also questions about major construction projects like the Innovation Center that have been added, after the vote. And I think we need to keep in mind that this is not general fund money that has no strings at all. It's bond money that doesn't have a lot of strings, but it does have some that's attached on there. I think I kind of like to go through the history and bring us up to date on how we got to where we are today. And this kind of goes back to Rich, your comment a minute ago about how the MCP is not the bond plan. I think that's one of the big misconceptions that's out there. It's like in the run up to the vote on the bond, if I go back and look at newspaper articles and press releases, things like that, and I see quotes from staff in there, and they all reference the MCP. They all point to that as being the document. And then at our second meeting of the MBOC, the MCP was presented to us. So we all took that to be the bond plan. And since that's the document we had. And I think over the past couple of years, as questions have come up, we've usually been referred to the MCP for those. And then in the 2019 MCP, all of the Tier 1 projects at the schools that were built 2006 and back, that they were all identified as being paid for by the bond. And that's the only public-facing document that the community has. So I think over the past couple of years, if anytime anybody asks a question about that, like me, I would refer them to the MCP. That's all we have. And I think that kind of continues through today, because the current district website, there's an area on there that states, where will my bond money go? And the answer is, it points us to the 2018-2019 MCP. And even like a more recent thing, it's like I'm looking at at a board agenda item. This is dated 12/10 of 2020, so about 6 months ago. And this was the board agenda item where the board approved the 2021 CIP projects for this coming summer. This was the Highlands Ranch package. And a part of the description on that agenda, it says that the guaranteed maximum prices include all Tier 1 and the most urgent Tier 2 capital improvement projects at schools in the 2018 bond. So as recently as 6 months ago, we were essentially telling the board that all Tier 1 projects would be done at schools that were included in the bond. And I think during the kind of the run up to the vote on the bond, I think overwhelmingly the maintenance and repair projects were stressed. That's pretty much, I think the foot soldiers we had out there, interacting with the community and trying to drum up support for the bond. That's pretty much what we were talking about. So we were out there saying that 100% of the Tier 1 and approximately 52 at all the neighborhood schools built in 2006 and back would be funded. And the Tier 1 and Tier 2 projects at charter schools, to the extent allowed by law, would be funded. Then to a lesser degree, I think it was the FPOD at Castle View, the Alternative Education School, the technology refresh, replacement of buses and transportation, security at both neighborhood and charter schools, furniture, and then career and tech education. But then at some point along the way, the focus on one hand got narrowed. And some of those Tier 1 projects got dropped off the list. So there were about 143 or 26% of those projects got dropped off for one reason or another. Then on the other side of the coin, the innovation campus got added, and that represents about 9% of the original bond amount.
Hey, John, this is Anthony. Can I just interrupt you for a second?
Yeah.
You're going through a lot of things, and I know the MBOC has been meeting regularly for quite some time. So I'm kind of interested, because this is all kind of news to me, what you're going through. Where is this stemming from? Has there not been any oversight of this up to this point, or where is this coming from that now all of a sudden you have just realized or recognized these things which you perceive to be as issues? I'm kind of confused. I guess this is all the first time I'm hearing this, being the committee liaison, and not having heard any of this until tonight, where there's a laundry list of items. So I'm just wanted to kind of get some clarity on that.
Anthony, I've raised this issue in September of last year, of that it's appeared the district was spending money on items that were not on the list for tier 1 or 50% of tier 2. And until just recently, the district has provided us some actual information to show that that's exactly what's happening, that they're not spending money on the stuff that was on the tier 1 or 50% of the original master capital plan. So that's why it's being brought up now, as we finally got the data out of the district. And so, yes, there are questions, and I think it is possible that the district's not following the intent of the bond proposal. You guys can argue with your attorneys all day long that this is totally legal and everything is fine and dandy, but that's not how it's going to go down when this goes public.
So, Mr. Maris, this is Krista Holtzman. I'm one of your board directors. I'm sorry to be interrupting. I'm on my phone. Hopefully you guys can hear me. I wasn't able to be there in person, but Director Chancho sure couldn't be there, so she asked me to fill in. And I don't want to insert myself here, but I'm the board liaison for the Long Range Planning Committee. And so we've actually discussed some of the issues that Mr. Freeman's bringing forward. In fact, we've discussed them in depth for hours and in many details. Staff has spent a lot of time with the leadership of the Long Range Planning Committee and with actually the full committee. And so I'm familiar with some of the things Mr. Freeman's talking about. And what I would say is that I believe that the LRPC and the MBOC overlap somewhat. Probably have overlapped more than they should have. But, basically the bottom line for all of this, I'm telling you, we've spent hundreds of hours looking into this, but I think the bottom line is that the master capital plan could have been more clear. And I, as one board director, certainly take responsibility for that. What I would say to you is that we have always, as a district, said that the master capital plan is not our bond plan. You can look back at the MCP and it actually states it in black and white. This isn't the bond plan. And I think we all understood that to a certain level. I think after the bond passed, we were so excited because Mr. Freeman and the others on the Long Range Planning Committee had spent literally decades trying to get a bond put on the ballot and get one passed. And I think you all know that. And so when it finally passed, we were like, how can we show people what has happened? And so we, as the LRPC committee, and me as just a liaison, I don't guess I'm exactly a member, I'm a liaison from the board, but said, let's show it in the bond. Let's highlight the things that are going to get taken care of. And so we did that. Well, like I said, I think we could have been more clear about that. I mean, we clearly are accountable for the bond language, and we're clearly accountable for all of the things we've said to the taxpayers, which you guys have been reviewing. That's actually not the LRPC's job. You guys have been doing that, and you've been doing it by looking at the CIP, the capital improvement projects. And that is what the bond relates to. And you've spent what, 2.5, maybe more years now looking at that in detail. And Mr. Cosgrove and Ms. Kataska have shown you 10 different ways how every dollar was spent to meet those needs, which were communicated to the public in many different ways. One of them was those one-pagers that we sent to all the schools and is on our website. And those things are absolutely happening. And I hate to take over your meeting here, but since I happen to be here for Director Chancho Shore, and I do have that experience with the LRPC. I do want to thank you for all of the work that you've done to look at that CIP and make sure that we're spending the money in the way that Mr. Cosgrove presented to you at your very first MBOC. And I don't want to restate what he said, but he can do that better than I. But I know, you know, the first 4 years of every tier one, and he can go from there. And you guys are the ones that have spent the work holding that accountable. And as one board member, I've appreciated your positive reports. So I don't know if that's helpful at all, but you know,
Krista, can you answer the question that we are funding all the projects that were tier one and 50% of tier two on the master capital plan that was presented to the voters that justified the $250 million in bonds?
And Mr. Maris, that I would refer you to the bond language. I don't believe that's what the ballot language says. I think that is a way we summarize things for the however many hundreds of thousands of people that live in Douglas County. And you are the committee that has been looking at it and making sure that has happened. And you have been telling us that it is. So I feel really good about it. And Mr. Freeman and I have had conversations, and I know that he doesn't have any concerns that the money has been spent in any way other than what we said in the ballot.
I have a quick question. This is Kristen Baumgartner. I think what I'm confused about is I have never heard anything to the contrary that we're not going to fund the tier one needs. And it even says in the NB5 report that was in our packet, in the first paragraph, it says, per the commitments from the bond campaign, it is the intent of the district to fund 100% of identified tier one needs at all identified schools and the most urgent tier two needs. And it says that in the report. So I'm just confused. Sorry, this is new to me too.
No, I think
is that true? Because John just said that 143 tier one projects got cut, and I'm not familiar with that, but I'm just a little confused from that comment.
Yeah. So I'm not sure if you've been on the inbox since the inception, but I don't think you're hearing anything different tonight. I think that is still what's happening. The tier ones are being funded, but as you and I both know, construction costs have skyrocketed, and our district has done the prudent thing, and they haven't gone in and just said, oh, hey, the lifespan of this rooftop unit was 10 years, so we're just going to replace it whether it's working or not. They're not going to do that. We don't want them to do that. We want them to replace it when it needs to be replaced. So you're not hearing anything different. It's still happening exactly as it's been presented to you, is my opinion as one board member.
And that's not my opinion. It never has been since last September. The district has been spending money on stuff that was not intended as part of the original commitment to the public voter. And it continues today. And until we get this reeled in and the Board of Education agrees that we need to reel this in, it's only going to get worse. And the voters are not going to be happy with this outcome.
If I can go back and try to answer Director Graziano's question. The reason you've not heard about this until today, and again, we've, one of the attachments that Rich sent us is what he is now calling the bond plan. And we are 2 years into this committee, and that's the first time we've seen the bond plan. Every other instance, we've all been referred to the MCP. And on the, if I can put on my LRPC hat for a second, so a couple months ago, the district sent me the draft MCP, the next one to review. And that's when I noticed that the 143 projects had been changed from identified to being funded with the bond to unfunded. So when I started to question that, that's when I found out that the district had never intended to fund those from day one. And I fully understand that the MCP is a 5-year plan. But now I'm being told that the bond is a 4-year plan. So those 143 projects were in year 5, and that's why they're not being funded. And on the projects that have been added, like the Innovation Campus, at the time until now, I haven't been concerned about that.
So John, let me interrupt you. So because I am aware of these things you've been talking about, I went back and I watched the first meeting of the MBOC. And what was told to you, unless I'm mistaken, by Mr. Cosgrove at that meeting was the first 4 years. So perhaps you don't remember and need to go back and look at that meeting, but I do believe that that is accurate.
Okay, well, I don't doubt that he said that, but that's not the information that we've been putting out there in the community. You know, we've been telling the community it's MCP.
Well, and I would say that you're the community, and that if you didn't hear that and you haven't been sharing that, I'm not sure what to say about that. But that is the information that was shared with you.
Well, that was, if it was shared, it was definitely not reinforced. That, I do not remember that. You know, all I remember is that every time we bring up something about, you know, will something be funded, we are referred back to the MCP. And so I think I'm very worried about what the community's reaction is, you know, is going to be to this. You know, when they find out that some of the projects they feel were going to be funded now are not, and the district's now spending money on a new building.
I'm sorry, I am a little confused again. The bond plan, is that on the website? Is that on the MBOC website, or is that listed out there or linked back to anything?
It's going to be under the, if you go to our website and look at the meeting minutes, it'll be one of the presentations that's under today's meeting. But that's the first time that it's been on the website or anywhere that I'm aware of that the public can get to.
So have you not been monitoring our bond spending for the past 2.5 years, John? I mean, have you not been looking at the ballot language, seeing what we said we were going to do, looking at the projects that Mr. Cosgrove presented and monitoring that? That is our bond plan. I mean, you need to keep in mind, excuse me, Mr. Maris, I'm talking.
Yeah,
have you not?
September as to what
I'm actually still talking.
Not on the list, and the district personnel have not given us this information until just recently.
So it's my understanding that the MBOC has been given the CIP from the very beginning, that you saw the ballot language, we know what people voted for, and that you've been looking to make sure those projects corresponded, and you've been signing off on it. And I've been seeing reports that you all share that say we've been doing that. So I'm kind of shocked at this point, but I would also hope that you all could keep in mind that our district hadn't even asked the public for money in 12 years. So that all of the staff at Douglas County School District hadn't done a bond, hadn't done anything like this in a very long time. And so yeah, is there things that we could maybe look back and think, oh, I wish we would have written something else down a different way? Perhaps there is, but I'm just really surprised that that this is coming up at this point, because I think that our staff has done a really good job.
So Director Holzman and John, if I may, so everything stated is correct thus far. You know, in the April 2019 meeting, we discussed what was in the bond. For example, the first 4 years of the identified Tier 1 in the 5-year master capital plan, any school older than 2007 for capital replacement. If you look in the last 3 master capital plans, and this is reference, Kristen Baumgartner said it, the quote, identified Tier 1. We're very careful to say identified and address versus completed, because if it doesn't need to be replaced, then we're going to be prudent and not replace it if there's at least 4 more years, if not longer, life cycle expected use on a product. And then the minute the bond was considered, one of the frequent FAQ, frequently asked questions on the MBOC website, says the most urgent Tier 1 needs. It doesn't say all, because we wanted to be very clear about that. And then in August of 2018, before the bond, and as reflected in the on the signs, and then as reflected on the monthly school reports that have been published every month, it's those identified Tier 1 needs that are in the bond plan, not all of them that were in the master capital plan, because the master capital plan had significantly more Tier 1 and Tier 2 needs than were approved by our leadership and sought for in the bond. So, and then probably a month ago, John expressed some concern, and I asked John, I said, what information would you like in addition to the detailed school reports that reflect the flyers, that reflect the signs, and those school reports list every tier 1 and tier 2. And so I made the offer. I said, how about we share the 1,000+ line capital improvement plan? So I was the one that came up with that idea. And just to be more transparent, say, you know, what would you like? And so I was just trying to be creative and provide more information, which is alignment with the flyers, in alignment with the school reports, in alignment with the expenditures that Kate manages, and as reported in the budget book. So that's the reason we wanted to share that. In addition, the other 2 documents we shared with was to show that our capital improvement plan, which you have as an attachment, which is estimated in the 2018 capital improvement plan, which was the basis for the bond, for 100% of the identified tier 1 in year 1 through 4 at the schools older than 2007, plus 50% funding to tier 2. That's $144 million. Well, sure enough, that ties literally $1 off because of rounding in the other attachment that's in the NV5 report to you. So we just wanted to be more transparent. So we as staff, we're the ones that came up with those reports. Said, well, you know, this is what we track. We can certainly share that if there's questions about what's already been shared. So anyway, hopefully that answers your question.
Well, it certainly helps. I mean, we're making progress. I say, but I just don't think it's been clear from day one on exactly what was going to be funded and what was not. And I don't think the average community person understands that. So I think at some point this is going to come back and haunt us. I wasn't sure. Now, did I answer your question, Director Graziano, about how this came to be today?
Yep, appreciate the response by both you and Jim.
Okay, any other questions, comments?
Rich, this is Joe, just a question. Is John's statement about 140+ items being taken off at tier 1, is that pretty much of an accurate statement?
Nothing was ever taken off for the bond plan. There are things that are identified in the master capital plan which were not included in the bond plan because of the difference in amounts. So for example, if you look at the 17, 18, 18, 19, 19, 20 master capital plan, and if you were to go in back in one of the appendices, in the 1920 master capital plan for neighborhood schools only for year 1 through 5, because that's a 5-year plan versus a bond, which is a 4-year plan, versus a capital improvement plan, which is literally goes out to about 2070 with life cycle costs. If you look in the 1920 master capital plan for 100% of the tier 1 and 50% of the tier 2 for neighborhood schools only, not including charters, well, there's 196 million right there. If you just look at the master capital plan, and as referenced, and Director Holtzman said this, in the front of that master capital plan in the executive summary of the previous plans, it says it's not a bond plan. And so the bond did not, the bond only included 250 million, and there were other things. There was 39 million worth of new construction in career tech ed, just in the 250. Then there was another 61 million for things like transportation, IT, security, charter schools, etc. And then what that resulted in was 144 million just for neighborhood schools capital improvement. Well, right there, you're already short. So no, there are items in the master capital plan that's going to be presented to the board this year because it's updated annually. There are tier 1 items that were in the previous master capital plan. There are 2 years of tier 1 items that have been added to the master capital plan because the master capital plan wasn't published last year because of the pandemic. And there are some tier 1s that were originally in year 1 through 4, but have since been identified since we have consultants and contractors on board is not being replaced. So there's really 3 reasons you're going to have tier 1s remaining in the master capital plan for consideration in the next bond.
So if an item was determined at school A that tier 1 was going to be pushed off being accomplished this year, how was that handled? I mean, how was that, who made that decision as to how that was going to happen?
Ultimately, I did. Ultimately, I did. With the help of architects, engineers, contractors, that was communicated to the principals, to a SAC rep at that school. And to date, we have not heard of any concern from principals, SACs. As Director Holzman said, after the LRPC understood the nuance between the master capital plan and bond plan, at the last meeting, they completely understood and acknowledged the master capital plan is not the tool to highlight bond projects because they are programming estimates and based on life cycle and used as the basis for bond planning. And the minute we proceeded with the bond, that's when we created the FAQs, the school flyers, the bond signs. And after the MBOC was stood up, that's what the reports and the individual school page reports reflected. So it all ties to the pre-bond. And if there is something not done on a bond sign because it wasn't needed, because it was determined not to be needed, the principal and the SAC were aware, and that's based on sound engineering practices.
Okay, thank you.
Rich, can I just ask a quick question? So on some of those projects that don't need to be addressed that were tier 1, how come they're not then moved to tier 2?
Well, the tiers never change. The tiers, if you look in the master capital plan, and this is the crossover in committees, the tiers identify the impact of the building system or component on the building. Typically a tier 1, if it fails, will either make a school unoccupiable or unusable. So for example, it's mechanical boilers, chillers, probably 85% of the tier 1 are mechanical and electrical. Tier 2 is something that would not close a school, but it will render a program unusable. For example, certain toilet fixtures, for example, carpet is tier 2. It's not just aesthetic, it's tripping hazards, it's indoor air quality. So it will not close a school. I mean, for example, Ponderosa had the original carpet before we replaced it in the bond. It didn't close a school, but it impacted learning. An artificial turf field, that will not close a school, but if it becomes unsafe, it will close a program. So that's tier 2. Tier 3 affects the quality of learning, and tier 4, I don't want to say is discretionary, but it's landscaping and the like. So the tiers never change, but the condition of the component, the urgency of an item that's tier 1 will become more urgent over time.
Thank you.
Sure.
Rich, one question I have. So, I mean, I've been on this from the very beginning, and I have been 100% supportive of this from the very beginning. I was going out, knocking on my neighbors' doors, talking about the bonds. I mean, I'm very passionate, and because of my financial background, made it a point to really educate people when we were going out for this issuance, how important this was. And I know that we're going to need to do this again and again. And so making sure that people understand how school financing works has always been one of my missions being part of this committee. And at the early meeting, district staff showed us somewhere on the website, and again, I'm not an expert on all your guys' documents, but showed us on the website where we could go and pull like a 1-pager on each school that shows tier 1, tier 2. And yeah. I have made it a point to, like, every parent I know that goes to different schools in Douglas County, I pointed them to those pages for their specific school and said, this is what you're getting with this bond deal. This is why it's important. This is how it impacts you. I just want to make sure that that is the right document that we've been pointing at, telling people this is what the bonds are doing for you. Because
absolutely,
I don't want it to be ingenuous, but I've been telling people either.
Nope, that's spot on, Kristen. Those flyers were made for that intent. And the bond signs say exactly what the flyers said. And the flyers were any tier 1 in year 1 through 4 at schools 2007 or older. And they were summarized to be concise. You've seen, or if you want to look at that attachment, we couldn't put for a school, 57 line items on there. We put HVAC systems, electrical systems. We did break out fire alarm systems. We broke out generators and door hardware. But beyond that, we left it, instead of having, 10 to 30 line items for electrical, we said electrical systems. So all of those items are being addressed. In the rare instance where there was an item that was determined not to need to be replaced, it's almost all cases except maybe a generator, I think at Cherry Valley Elementary. It was a component of one of those line items that were a summary of many line items. So those flyers are spot on. Exactly, we are doing that. And we're doing those, and those are reflected in the signs, and those are reflected in the school reports that have been posted and communicated. So exactly, that's the intent for those flyers. It wasn't the master capital plan, it's the flyers for the bond.
Hey, John.
Yes.
So appreciate that, Rich, and you've come well prepared for accidentally being here, and I can appreciate that. And Mona, by the way, welcome to the MBOC. It's not always this spicy, so you got us on a great night. It's a good night to start. I think if I could have the floor for like 20 seconds, because really a little of this gets diverted between what we individually would like to see and our perception of maybe what the MBOC committee was and what it really is. Frankly, the bond language is fairly broad, right? There's nothing here that's out of line. The bond, I'm looking at the ballot right now, and here's what your voters signed up for. Give me 250 million with a payment of, X amount. Got done. Oversubscribed. I mean, let's face it, if somebody did the math, we issued a 5% bond in a AA+ rated Douglas County School District. That's going to bring in 3.5%. It's going to be oversubscribed. We're going to have extra money. High quality problem. It's exactly what the voters approved. And to the bond language, enhancing safety, security, providing equipment in classrooms, updating school buildings, and acquiring, constructing, or improving any capital asset that the district is authorized by law to do. So there's nothing here that's out of line. You might call it unsportsmanlike conduct. You might not like it personally because it was a tier 1, it was a capital improvement, it's a new building, it's a something, but it's all within the language of the bond. It's exactly what people approve. This is what you get, people, when you vote for a bond that has broad language and broad application as this. And the charge of the MBOC committee, because I'm looking at that, says making sure that ensuring that MLO bond expenditures are in alignment with the ballot language approved by the voters. So there's nothing completely out of line here. I don't want anybody to get really defensive about whether or not it is or it was deceptive or whatever. Our purview is whatever you've spent money on so far looks like it falls under the MLO bond language approved by the voters, as was the bond raise and the debt that we financed. It's really not our job to figure out what those priorities are. You bring them to us and say, you guys did all the due diligence. These are the priorities. And is this spending within the language of the bond and the ballot? And we say yes or no. I haven't heard anybody say no. It's just getting a little bit more clear how the money was used. We may or may not like it, but I'm not sure I would say any of it was outside of the language of the ballot. Does that summarize where we are?
To a degree, yes. Yeah, I don't think anyone's saying that that there's been any misspending. It all fits within the bond language on the ballot. I don't think there's any question about that.
Yeah, well, then we're discussing whether or not we thought it was a priority, and I don't think that was our job. I'm not sure any of us would like it. I'm not sure the public in broad daylight and a whole lot of review would necessarily agree, but meets the ballot.
So this is Sabrina, and I have a question. How does the COP payoff factor into the bond language?
Rich, you want to take a stab at that?
And so to Jim's response, the COPs were issued far in advance of the bond, and so they're not necessarily included as part of that bond programming. Is that what you're asking, Sabrina?
Yes, ma'am, that's correct. But I know that there's talk about using 12 million, if I'm not mistaken, of the bond money to pay off the COP. And so I'm just wondering, legally, how does that fit into the bond language?
Let me find that, unless you know off the top of your head, Rich.
No, Kate, I know that's an area that you're familiar with respect to the COPs.
Had those conversations with Scott, Kate, before you got here. And so the idea is that the COPs were higher interest rates, and those payments come right out of the general fund of the district. And so it made sense to use bond proceeds, which they determined that the extra bond money, the premium, could legally be used to pay off the COPs and not be a violation of the bond language, is my understanding. And that all occurred soon after the bonds were issued to reduce the dependency for debt payments on the general fund and shift it over to the tax levies that the bond authorized. So again, it's to me, that was a great move. It saved the district money in their general fund. As far as I'm concerned, it should pay them all off. But there's some penalties for doing that, so the district decided not to. So again, it's the same issue. The language in the bond was so broad, and with the 38 million in premium, the legal determination essentially is they can do whatever they want with that premium. Now, there's been times where that commitment to use the premium for bond language type projects has been made, I believe. And you know, that was of course the issue with the CU building up in Lone Tree that was proposed to be purchased. Is the idea was that bond premium is going to use for part of that as well. So, you know, there's been, you know, different things on the bond premium on what it's legally can be used for and whether the district is committed to using that money for bond type projects that were identified.
Did that answer your question, Sabrina?
Yes, it did. Thank you all very much. I appreciate that.
Okay. So anything else on this particular part of the subject? Okay. Well, Rich, I think you had some other attachments you sent out to us. You're muted.
You're mute, Rich.
Sorry about that. Thanks. So I just want to highlight, Sandy and Jenny sent out several attachments. And again, I wanted to ask John, what additional information would you like that would increase your comfort level to show what was the basis for, in essence, the school flyers? And that's the capital improvement plan. And so everyone understands, I just want to summarize, the capital improvement plan is a listing by project of all of the capital needs in the district. And it's based on life cycle and 4 other components. And one of the components is the condition. So for example, if something really starts to fail and it's due to be replaced 8 years from now, we're going to put it in the 5-year master capital plan. If not, then we add requirements to the master capital plan from the capital improvement plan every year. So last year we added what was in year 6 and 7 that was not in the previous master capital plan because it's been 2 years since we published. And that document is provided to you. And I do want to highlight that document that you have was the capital improvement plan for the neighborhood schools only, used in the $250 million bond scenario when when we were given the target $250 million bond, because let me back up, in February of 18, the LRPC and the FOC briefed our Board of Education. Here's what you get for 200, here's what you get for 300. Well, after counsel from our financial investors and direction from our leadership, it was determined we're going to go for a $250 million bond. So the piece of the $250 million bond for neighborhood schools, capital renewal, capital improvement, capital replacement is in that document that you have. And that's over 1,000 lines. And what we did, once we knew how much money we could put at schools, we changed all of the urgency. Instead of year 1 through 4, we changed it to 1. So the rest of the prioritization components could give us a true priority of how do we package, bundle projects. We'd like to do the oldest needs with the largest capital needs first. And in general, we did that. But you can't do that all of the time because of you want competitive packages for construction management general contractors. You want them regionally based. So we would actually get bids on the projects. So that CIP, capital improvement plan, it's the tier 1 and all of the tier 2. Well, we didn't do all of the tier 2 because we only had funds for 50% of the tier 2. But that's a starting point that we use to make sure nothing on that list is dropped off except 50% of the tier 2. And the 50% of the tier 2 that was included was, that decision was made in part with the principal and the school SAC. So that's the document there. The other document is a total project budget list, which shows for every school that has the urgent tier 1s in the bond, and plus the 50% funding for all of the tier 2s at that schools. That's how much money we had per school. And our owner's rep NV5 and architects, consultants, and contractors cannot exceed that. If they do, we need to go into bond premium. And so that's that document. And then the third document is a bond premium spend and forecast from NV5 or owner's rep that shows how much bond premium we're going to need to complete the urgent tier 1s at our neighborhood schools and the tier 1s at charter schools that are allowed by law. There's 8 charter schools in this bond. And we didn't do any tier 2 at charters. And we only did a portion of the tier 1s that were allowed by law. We were allowed to do building components that physically could be removed if something happened to that charter school. So we couldn't do carpet, we could do rooftop units, we could do phone systems and things like that. And that's something that bond counsel briefed to the board while we were pursuing the 2018 bond. So if you look at the bottom line of that document, it's 143 million and change, and that matches the second document that you have, the pre-bond planning, 143 million. So we're on target. And then whatever's above that 143 million is the bond premium used. And of the 15 million, we're currently forecasting to have 4.9 million of bond premium remaining. And that's on the presentation, which is later on in your meeting agenda. So John, did that give a pretty good summary of it?
I think so. See, I just wish we had that bond plan 2 years ago.
Well,
and I think also, if we could, so like for instance, when the board approves the 2022 CIP, included with that, I would include an actual list of the projects.
Well, it is. When anything goes to the board for guaranteed maximum price, all of the documents are there. Now that's not in the form of a capital improvement plan or master capital plan. That's in the form of a schedule of values from the contractor. So all of those items are there. So for example, the contractor will not bid on the individual line items. They'll say, per the Construction Specifications Institute for Electrical, here is the price to do all of the items in the design documents. And those design documents will list the CIP projects. So that is in the information presented to the board. And I would just say in the future, if if you want additional information, or if you wanted it several years ago, let me know, because we certainly could have provided the detailed CIP at that point, because that's the CIP that was used two years ago. So we'll be happy to do that. And if you need anything else, if there's still questions or additional information needed, our plan, again, was the school reports by school and what scopes were being done, tier 1 and tier 2, as reflected in those school reports for the tier 1 and tier 2. So hopefully that answers your question.
Okay. Any questions from anybody else before we move on?
I just have one quick question. So I understand now a little bit better that part of it, but as Jim mentioned, then adding the innovation campus, how was that decision made to use bond funds then for that new project?
Sure, and I'll ask Kate to chime in also. So in addition to bond premium, there's bond interest. There's also cash in lieu funds that we as a district receive from development. By state statute, for student generation and for capacity for schools, developers have to give us either land or cash in lieu of land. And the cash in lieu of land is based on appraised values as approved by the land authority, either Douglas County, Castle Rock, Parker, for example. And that by state statute can be used for growth related planning and construction, not to fix stuff that's there, but for growth. So for example, you could use it for mobiles, for building additions for a new school. So during the bond, it was determined that, and let me back up, the board approved the Pine Drive site in Parker to construct an alternative education school and to master plan for the Innovation Center. It was determined that there was forecasted enough bond premium, bond interest, and cash in lieu to pool together for another urgent need, which was the Innovation Center. So not just to master plan that site, but to actually do it. So that was a superintendent decision in accordance with the language of the bond. And so basically that was staff following the approval of the bond language to use those funds under the same rules of the bond itself. And Kate, if you want to add anything else on that.
No, I think that's fairly well covered. To speak to the interest portion of it, as we, as we generate bond proceeds and have our forecasts on draw schedules and when projects will complete, we work with a company called PFM to invest those proceeds. So we do that based on, those known or estimated timelines so that we can maximize. So that's the interest that Rich is speaking of that was pooled into that project.
I would just add, as as we wrap up the section, because again, we welcome and what we want to get as an oversight committee, it's important to get this feedback. Is John, if there's things we can do differently, if something's been missing up to this point, and that we can add or do something differently going forward, let's incorporate that into the process. So we, again, this improves for us all. So I would just throw that out there and have everyone consider that for the next meeting, or just in the interim between now and the next meeting. Let myself know, let Mr. Cosgrove know, et cetera, about this, because again, we'd want to tweak it as necessary, just like with anything, any group you're working on, you want to adjust and do things better. So if we can do some things better, differently, et cetera, going forward, just communicate that.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so Rich, your other reports, are they more for this section or more for the bond update section?
So we also have the standard quarterly reports from our owners rep in V5. And if now's a good time, we could lead into that, and Jessica Killian, our program manager, would provide that update.
Okay. Well, before we do that, let's do the next item on the agenda is the MBOC annual report. So on that, I'm really looking for a couple of people to volunteer to work on that report, start formulating it. Is there anybody that would like to work on that report? Okay, well, I will start working on the report, and I'll come up with a draft and send that out for people to review. Okay, so thank you for that. Okay, so now we'll move on to the bond update. So Rich.
And I'll turn it over to Leela Rajashekar, Director of Construction, and Jessica Killian, our Program Manager from NV5.
Thank you, Rich. As you all know, right now we are in thick of the construction season. So as Jessica goes forward with the presentation, you'll see that there's a lot of construction that's going on. And maybe after this, we could talk a little bit about site visits too later this summer. Jessica.
We're not hearing you, or at least I'm not.
Yeah, no. Rich, did you want me to go through any of the handouts or just the presentation talking about things? Now, Rich is on mute.
Standard presentation, thanks.
Presentation.
Okay, got it. I'm on it. All right. This one, and then we're gonna make it go. All right. Okay, you guys can see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. All right, so yeah, like Leo said, we started construction about a month ago, right? Literally as students and teachers were walking out the door, we had contractors walking in. I think there were probably people even working that night on the last day of school. And we've done a lot since then. The next meeting in September, we'll have all of our completion pictures, but we've got a ton of stuff to show now. So I think everybody that's on the call right now has seen this spiel of what we have going on, how the bond is broken down into the buckets of money. So I'm not going to spend too much time on that, but obviously if you've got questions, please let me know. One of the things that I added for this report at Rich's request was a discussion of how the phasing has worked. We have accelerated some projects, which has made them be slightly cheaper because we didn't have quite as much escalation. So wanted to go through that just real quickly. In 2019, if you'll recall, we did do work that very first summer. There were roof replacement projects, flooring replacement projects primarily. Some of the security projects started. So we got some things that were pretty quick and easy to get designed and contracted. In 2020, which was the first summer of super major construction, we did 23 schools. That's slightly less than the number of schools that we had that that was the plan was 23. We did 24 schools because we moved up the Castleview High School CIP work. That was actually scheduled for the summer of 22. But since we already had A&P on site building the FPOD, we accelerated that project up a couple years and saved a little bit of money related to that. Then in 2021, the original plan was to do 21 schools. We're now actually doing in 2021, 23 schools. We accelerated 2 of the high schools, Mountain Vista High School and Rock Canyon High School. I think it was Mountain Vista, it might've been Highlands Ranch, but moved those into summer of 21. Again, we knew that we could do it because summer of 2020 went well. And so we moved those up in order to get them done sooner. Again, costs going up, escalation, everything like that. And just, not take up those schools for the summer of 22. So as a result, because we moved 3 schools up in the bond, we only have 10 schools that are going to happen next summer in summer of 22. So next summer will be a little bit quieter. There's still, I don't think there's any high schools in the summer of 22. It's mostly elementary schools and middle schools. There will be some work at high schools because of some stuff, some flooring projects that are going to happen next summer. But this summer, I don't know if I knew this when I met with you guys in March, but I did the math between March and now, and the bond in general, not just the CIP projects, but everything, we're spending $1.4 million a day this summer. So it's massive construction projects and work that's going on. So it's pretty awesome. We also then have the owner-led projects that brought some of these projects, roofs, controls, which are what control the mechanical systems, the fire alarms, door hardware, those got pulled out of being under a general contractor and are being run direct to the contractor responsible for that. That saved about $10 million because there was a whole bunch of people that didn't have to be involved in getting those done. And so we did those direct. So there's been a lot of ways that even given the established projects, we've been able to save some costs. So again, wanted to go over that, which you guys probably haven't seen in this detail before. So now to the fund. So 2021 CIPs, all the standalone controls projects are complete. There is some controls projects that are happening this summer related to the rooftop units and HVAC work that we're doing, but everything that was just a controls project is done. That was about $6 million, I think, of work. The fire alarm projects are nearly complete. We did have a bunch that were going to happen this summer, but as you know, the COVID learning loss things and some additional school work that needed to happen, educational work that needed to happen at schools this summer, we adjusted some of the timing on that. Some of them got accelerated. Some of them are going to get done in the fall to give this sort of window of the summer to allow people to be in the schools. Fire alarm projects are one of the major projects that mean that people can't be, you know, normal non-construction folks can't be in the building because the fire alarm's offline, the life safety system is offline. But all that said, we're nearly done with the fire alarm projects and will be by this fall. There's some standalone roof projects that are in progress. This is the last summer of standalone roof projects. And then of course the CIP work, which is those 24 schools that are happening this summer. Our targeted completion as of today is still July 30th, 2021. That's the Friday before teachers come back to school on August 2nd. There's 2 schools that is not the case and has always been the case. Douglas County High School was scheduled to be actually a 2-summer project. The contractor and project manager and architect have worked together to make that only a 1-year project, but there is going to be some work that's going to happen at that school after kids come back. It's not going to affect occupancy or anything like that, but there will still be some work going on. And then Pine Lane North, I mentioned this in March. That project is a very, very invasive project. So there's actually modulars on site in Parker right now for that school, and the elementary students are going to be at going to school in modulars for the first couple of months. So again, not affecting occupancy, not affecting students, but just a little bit different for them to come back there. But all the rest of the projects are currently scheduled to be done. There are some things that we're starting to see with materials and other things, but we're working with the project team to make sure that we can, again, not affect students coming back to school. That's our main goal. So now lots and lots of pictures. And again, I'll have a bunch more in September. If you live in Parker, or I guess even Highlands Ranch and Castle Rock, I live in Parker, so there's been a lot of cranes around, which is super exciting. We have some big mechanical units, so we have some big cranes. So Bear Canyon and Buffalo Ridge, they're setting mechanical units, taking them off, putting them on. Castle Rock Elementary is having a lot of rooftop work as well. We've got curbs, rooftop units being taken off, and new rooftop units being put on. Chaparral High School is getting new flooring in their restrooms, along with a whole bunch of mechanical work. Cherokee Trail, they're replacing the windows, so you can see the window taken out here. Copper Mesa Elementary, this picture is actually from a week or 2 ago, and they already have the new countertops in at Copper Mesa. So these are new countertops and sinks in the restrooms. Douglas County High School, again, major project there. Actually, if you read the week in review, I think 2 weeks ago, there was a specific focused article about what's happening at Douglas County High School, but they've got all windows taken out, doing a new entrance. Eagle Ridge Elementary, everything's taped off so that they can work on the ceiling up above. Flagstone Elementary, they've taken out the toilet partitions. They'll be getting new ones. Flagstone is also getting a standalone roof project, and so this is what the roof looks like once they vacuumed all the rock. They literally vacuumed the rock with a giant truck. So this is what the roof looks like once they've taken all the rock and getting the new roof on. Highlands Ranch High School is getting new flooring. Again, Mountain Ridge Middle School also getting new flooring, and that flooring's already in. Again, like I said, our contractors showed up as people were walking out so that they could start walking in. Mountain Vista High School, new toilet partitions in their restrooms. Pine Grove Elementary is getting new mechanical work, so this is looking up above the ceiling. Pine Lane North, like I said, massive project happening there. They are going to be reinforcing all of the roof framing, and so they've got a whole bunch of stuff that's coming down so that they can put new stuff up. So like I said, big project. Pine Lane South is also getting some mechanical work, so they're working on the ceiling there. Redstone, we have materials stocked. They haven't started doing the flooring, but that's a smaller project. But they've got materials stocked on there, which is good because materials are an issue because of COVID. Rock Ridge Elementary is getting a new roof. Rocky Heights Middle School, again, flooring's already done in that commons area. So that already is looking good. Sand Creek Elementary, new mechanical unit. Sierra Middle School, again, roof curbs. That was an issue we had last year, is that we couldn't measure the roof curbs and get those. So we were a little concerned, got everything squared away, but this year we've got roof curbs. Summit View Elementary, this is in the kitchen. And so they're doing some replacements there, and then we'll get the flooring poured back and new flooring put in. Timber Trail, new roof at Timber Trail. Again, all the rock's been vacuumed up. They're going to put new stuff in there. Larkspur Elementary is actually a 2022 CIP project. So you'll see pictures next summer from Larkspur, but they have some pretty big drainage problems. And so that's a tier 2 project on the exterior that was moved up to this summer because it was something that we didn't want to wait another year to do. So this is part of their tier 2 funding. It was approved by the SAC and the principal and everything, but it's happening this summer to get that taken care of. Roxborough Intermediate and Clear Sky both had concrete replacement projects that are happening. So those are in progress. That's the 2021. There's a few more projects. Rock Canyon High School, they had controls already done. They're getting a roof. It hadn't quite started by the time I was putting these pictures in. And then they've got some interior stuff that's happening. So that's, I think, the only school in 2021 that there wasn't a picture of. Just to review what's happening in 2022, because that's already starting as well. If you remember from last year, we were already starting 2021 at this time. 2022 is broken down a little bit differently. And so there's 3 CIP projects, which are how you've seen them the last couple of years, tier 1, tier 2, under a general contractor. And that's DC Oaks, Sedalia, and Northridge. Wold has been selected as the architect. So they've actually been an architect for the last 2 years of CIP projects. So and have done a great job, so know what they're doing. Hemmelman is a new contractor for the CIP projects. They've been selected as the CMGC, so same contracting method, but that's the team. There's also a bunch of electrical projects that are happening in 2022, and so those are actually going to be grouped all together. We're going to get an electrical engineer, an electrical contractor, and just do those direct. It's generators, it's some switch gear, that kind of stuff. And then there's a lot of tier 2 projects that are related to some of those tier 1 electrical that are happening as well. And those are going to happen with an architect and general contractor as needed. It may just, if it's flooring, it may just be done direct. Highlands Ranch High School is going to have flooring done next summer. That's a 2021 CIP, but that's going to kind of to keep it out of everybody's way and not mess things up. That's going to happen next summer. And then I think Douglas County High School's flooring may also be happening next summer, and that's not listed on here as well, but that'll wrap up those tier 2s in that. So that's all the CIP. Again, lots and lots and lots of work. And Leila will talk about some tours later. Castleview High School FPOD, it has a certificate of occupancy for the building. Major milestone happened on June 3rd, I believe. They are moving in furniture this week. It started getting delivered on Monday, so there's furniture going in this week, and we're planning a ribbon cutting. So these pictures are a couple weeks old, but still some pretty cool stuff. These are movable bleachers. They push back into the wall and will stack up when you don't need them, but they'll pull out. This is in the multi-purpose room. There's a pretty impressive journalism program going into this FPOD. So this is the green screen that they will be using that will allow them to do all of their media. Some typical classrooms. This is again also in the multi-purpose room, but pretty cool logos and stuff on the floor. So again, typical classroom. And then the tennis courts are also getting done at Castleview. And so they have torn them all out and they're working on putting them back in as well. That's funded by the athletics, not by the FPOD, but at the same site. Then also the other new construction is the Alternative Education School and the Innovation Center on Pine Drive. Again, we've talked about before, the Alternative Education School on Pine Drive was part of the original bond language. There's no alternative ed programming at the high school level in Parker, and so this was always part of the bond. The Innovation Center, like we touched on before, is something that's being funded out of interest and premium and cash in lieu. So current status of this, I think when I mentioned in March, we had talked a little bit about Hills Drive being realigned. Hills Drive is the site that's on the north side of the property. That is getting realigned to match up with Parker Hills Court, which is across Pine Drive. You'll see it very easily. I think I've got a site plan here in a second, but that is being redesigned. That is complete. The alternative education school was submitted for building permit on Monday. So that's a pretty big milestone. That'll take 8 to 10 weeks to get through the state. We're working on getting, we turned in the site plan last December, got comments back in February, have gone through quite a bit of site redesign for a number of reasons, but those are getting submitted to the town. Today's Wednesday, tomorrow morning. We have annexation and rezoning comments that have been received and responded to. Annexation of the 2 acres at the top that was I don't know, I'm blanking on the word, but that was deeded to the school district, no money. We got that 2 acres from Douglas County. So that's now it's 20-acre site, and then rezoning the whole site to make it be public facilities. Right now it's zoned plan development, which is a little bit more of a residential commercial development. So just cleaning up some of the entitlements there. We are signing already a contract for the steel joist and deck for all the alternative education school, even though we're not breaking ground until this fall, late fall, because of all of the Amazon big box stores that have been built globally, not just in the United States. Steel joist and deck are about 6 to 8 months out. In a 12-month construction project, we don't have 8 months to wait for joist. So the design is done, and so we're ordering joist and deck to be delivered in February for the alternative education school. Probably do something similar for innovation here in another couple months once that design is a little bit further along. But Innovation Center drawings are about 50% complete. They'll be 100% complete by the end of the summer. We'll submit those to the state as well and go through the whole process. So lots going on for that one too. Again, this is the site. Previously, you had seen this at Hills Drive, just went straight down the north side of the site. I don't know if you guys can see my mouse, so I apologize if I'm writing on this, you can't see, but we have realigned Hills Drive to align with Parker Hills Court. Innovation Center and Alternative High School are still in there. We will have a traffic light at that new intersection, but the town of Parker is going to pay for and install that. We paid them $50,000 based on contracts that were already in place, and they're going to pay the remaining potentially $350 or more. Traffic lights are not cheap, so that's a really good benefit to the project. Some interior renderings, which you guys have not seen of this school. This is the alternative education school. This is looking up from the main common area, kind of towards the classroom. There'll be some little breakout nooks for people to meet. The furniture is still not planned. This is the architect's idea of it. And then at the Innovation Center, this is also the main commons area. That's a learning stair that people will be able to sit on, have presentations on. So some pretty exciting stuff happening inside these buildings as well. Then career technical education. This is a major summer for that. There was $15 million in the bond for career technical education, and we're doing those construction projects this summer. So Thunder Ridge High School got a little bit of an addition. We've infilled between 2 wings. So that's what you see here is an infill. For programming, Highlands Ranch High School also has an addition to their building. Those both started at spring break. I think I mentioned that last time, and are both coming along. Douglas County High School has a wood shop, auto shop, Pro Start kitchen. So we're working there. Rock Canyon High School, similarly, also blowing and going. And Mountain Vista High School has some work happening too. Chaparral High School has some pretty small stuff, so they actually hadn't started when I was putting these pictures in there. It's really just some reworking of their forensic science and computer science classroom. But this is a plan of what's happening in that school. And then Legend High School as well, some pretty small, just reworking of existing spaces. Ponderosa High School, this is actually from over spring break when they were building in a new opening in the wood shop, and they're also getting a Pro Start kitchen. And then athletics, Legend High School is getting a new tennis court. Like I said, Castle View High School is getting their tennis court. Track replacements at Mountain View High School and Legend High School, I think started this week, might start next week, but those are going on as well. They had some soils issues that had to be addressed and taken care of, so but they're getting through that and getting those done. And then just a few other projects I showed you last time. Some playgrounds. Mountain View Playground got done a week or so ago, and I just think the equipment is adorable. And then Stone Canyon Base Camp at their visitor center is getting quite a bit of work, so that's happening down in Larkspur. So all that to say, after we spend $1.5 million a day, our next step, the first three are the same, always have been, continue overall bond project planning, monitoring the cash flow and the draw schedule, and communication to all stakeholders. We really, really tried to be better about that this year. Last year, I think we did, we as planning and construction and school leadership and everybody did a good job, but there were still some questions. So we've really tried to push the information out as frequently as possible. And so far, I feel like it's gone better. We haven't had somebody call us a week before construction and say, hey, I didn't realize that you guys were tearing up my school this summer. So that's a win. But then in just the short term before we see you again in September, we're going to complete all of the 2021 CIP projects, finalize procurement for the designers and contractors for the summer of 22. We're completing the athletics projects. I believe that spends most of the money left in the athletics. There might be some stuff that's happening at Douglas County Stadium that's still part of that. Continuing the security improvements at the schools. A bunch of money has been spent on security over the last 18 months, and there's a lot more that's kind of finishing out in that. We'll have the ribbon cutting for the Castleview High School FPOD. That save the date is going to go out by the end of this week, and I know it's going to you guys as well. And then finalizing the pricing for the alternative education school. We were originally planning on taking that to the board in August. It sounds like we might wait a little bit longer just to get through some of the state comments and things like that, because we're not starting construction until November, December. We have a little bit of time, and I want to make sure that that is full and complete and as done as possible. So that'll be going, maybe not by the time I see you guys again in September, but shortly thereafter. So lots and lots of stuff. I did that very fast, like I usually do, because there's a lot to go through. But I'm happy to go back and look at things. This whole presentation is obviously in your packet as well, so you can see that. But if there's any questions, I am happy to take them and or go back to something else.
Anyone have any questions on this?
I asked a question in the chat. This is just a random question. I have little kids, so I'm not familiar with some of the high school structures yet, but for things like the Innovation Center and Career Tech, when you talk about those types of programs, I'm just curious, is that something that students have to apply for, those programs, or are they open to anyone in the school district to participate in?
So I can take that. They would not be application based. Similar to a student enrolling in maybe concurrent enrollment and taking a class at a community college, they would not be unenrolled from their home school either. So they would be able to take a class or classes in either of those programs or at the Innovation Center.
Oh, that's awesome. I wasn't sure. Thank you.
And I know part of the CTE projects that we're doing this summer is to address some of that. Like, if fire science was only offered in Highlands Ranch and there's somebody in East Parker, it's to make that CTE programs more spread out, where and fill some of those needs. And I see Director Graziano nodding, so he may be able to address some of that too.
I was just going to say, just from my own experience with my own kids, is that, if there were programs in other schools that they wanted to attend, they could enroll in there. And, for instance, my daughter took classes in Douglas County High School for a program that they had there. So if you wanted to enroll your kid in the fire science program at Rock Canyon, they could do so there. So the intent behind the career tech programs is that, you can, optimally they're close to you, but if for those that you can't get to, you can certainly enroll in them for your students, for your kids.
Jessica, I have a question on, your school reports where you list the individual schools and what's being done. So I think it would be helpful if we could, if Rich mentioned, I think it was February 2018 when the original, bond list, project list was created. If we could see that, and then I guess it's probably like the district budget process where it gets revised at some kind of a regular schedule. If we could see what revisions or see the revisions so we can, see what was on the original list and what's been added or deleted since then. Particularly, one of the projects that I identified back in September, which was Sedalia, where the original, again, going back to the MCP, which I guess is no longer valid. One of the lists on the MCP was to replace the bedding material at the playground. And back in, when we did the September meeting, we had your reports. I had pointed out that we had replaced all the playground equipment. And I didn't see that as being identified on the original MCP as a tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, or tier 4. And as I go look at your individual school reports and I look at Sedalia now, that playground replacement is still not listed on your report for Sedalia Elementary. So I guess, I get the report thing, but we need to know everything that's being done at these schools. And if we need to change how you're reporting stuff to us, I don't know how we get to that point, but it doesn't seem like we're getting all the information at the same time for the schools, that are relevant to us being able to perform our oversight.
And let me speak to Sedalia specifically. So Sedalia's playground was funded out of the playground bucket of money, not out of their CIP. And so, and the fact that it's not listed on the school report is honestly an oversight. We didn't write a school report when that playground was replaced. And so now that we're writing it because it's a 2022 CIP, we just need to up that. But that was not CIP money that funded the Sedalia playground. That was the playground bucket. So, and I think to your point about the February 2018 list of projects, I would defer that to Wayne and Rich to get that. But my understanding is that's the same thing that was issued as part of the packet. But we can definitely get that information to you if there's a variance to that.
Yeah, Jim, I think that's a good question. We can not only make reference to what the bond signage said on the school reports, but we could also sort, if you look at that CIP, capital improvement plan, it's alphabetical by school. So you could have a 2-page report, for example, and have the school bond construction, design and construction update as is, but then you could have a second page, or maybe the first page with the 2018 capital improvement plan that was a basis for the bond, as well as the summary of those items that are reflected on the school pages. So yeah, we can certainly do that.
Wayne and I spent, 4 or 5 hours in January of 19 putting together individual budgets and scope, based on that thing. So we can definitely attach those. I still have all of those listed in all of our breakouts. So if that's, but we can talk about the details of that, Rich, and how you want that to look.
I think it's a great recommendation. And along those lines, one of the attachments that are provided, and please give us your feedback on that as well. What we've found is, certainly with the MCP, people go to their school page. And so hence we had the bond updates alphabetical by school, because that's what they're interested in general. But we've compiled all that in one single document. I think it's a 30 or 40 page document. So everyone can have one document with all the school reports instead of going to different links. It's the same information, it's just on one document. So please give us feedback on that too, but yeah, we'll make a note on that. Okay, thanks.
Okay. Any other questions for Jessica? Okay, well, thank you, Jessica. Okay, so back to you, Rich or Leela.
The only one thing that I do want to talk about is, as we just mentioned a few minutes ago, site visits, tours, similar to what we did last year. I know quite a few of you have attended, did attend last year's construction site tours. We are at this point in time, I'm just going to give some dates and you can tell me what works and then we can just go from there. We are thinking July 13th, 14th, or 15th. Those are the 3 days that we currently have. Is it Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday? We thought, given that now everybody's pretty much back at work and stuff, it may be beneficial if we do maybe at a 7 a.m. kind of tour, or maybe at 4 p.m., preferably not both on 3 days. either or. So basically, I guess I'm giving 6 times, out of which please let us know, maybe, 3 times, whatever works for you, and then we'll try to schedule some tours. And I don't have the list of schools at this point in time. I'd like to see which ones are heavy under construction, and we'll make sure that you get to see all of the action as much as possible. And we will have hard hats and vests for all of you whenever you come to the site.
That's exciting to be able to get back into a school and see something.
Mm-hmm. So we thought you'd like that.
Yeah, no, I love that. Well, that's one of my favorite things, is to go look at a school. I love that. Let's see. Well, perhaps everybody could shoot me an email the next week or so, and let me know, number one, if you'd like to go on the tour, and then which dates or times might be best for you. And I'll kind of compile that and get back with you, Leela.
Yep, that'd be great.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yep. Okay, we're back to Rich.
And John, can you share the agenda, please?
Me?
I want to confirm the next item.
But we still haven't done the
reallocation.
The reallocation of funds.
Yes. So thank you. So if I may, John, is now a good time for that as part of the bond update? Okay.
Yeah.
So can someone please share that? Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay. So it's a very short agenda, but I want to go through the presentation. And so as a result of being, probably by the end of this summer, we'll be 2/3 through the bond. And we're going to have the same discussion next year at this time for actual costs as they have come in, some over, some under, some requirements being identified as not being needed, not just at schools, and again, very few at schools, very few tier 1 from a percentage wise. Again, most of the items in the tier 1 in the new master capital plan are 2 years of data added and increased costs. And in addition to some of the tier 1 that were determined not to be needed. But for the other buckets of money that, and again, I defer to Kate on the transparency website as well as the budget book on these sub budgets. But if we may recall that 61 million of the 250 million, and this was in the April presentation in 19 to the MBOC and August 7th to the board, of the 250, 61 million was capital reinvestment. And that included many things. Again, from IT, transportation, furniture, playgrounds, ADA, Americans with Disability Act, district-wide support facilities, things like that. We've also determined in those areas that there are some projects that we did not need to pursue in a phase 2, for example. We've done phase 1 for the urgent needs and support facilities, the same tier 1 and tier 2 needs that are at schools, but the others aren't as urgent as other priorities that have come up. So that's the purpose of this presentation. So next slide, please. We'll first look at available funds, then priorities for reallocation, and then I know it's been discussed about the bond language, but then the last is a charge of the committee. So next slide, please. So oh, that didn't turn out too good, did it? That's a little off center. So let me just describe this. I'm looking at PowerPoint and it's beautiful, but evidently in Google, it's not coming up completely aligned. So for playgrounds, we had 6 million budgeted. We have 869 that is remaining that is not needed for other priority or urgent playgrounds. The district initiatives, we had 8 million, and the district initiatives are used for capital reinvestment across the district. Multifunctional printer device, $1.5 million. Outdoor education, Stone Canyon, almost 3 million. There have been support fleet vehicles. While transportation had significant funds, we also had support vehicles, sometimes called the white fleet because they're painted white, and $1 million of the 8 million just for that. So these are the district initiatives that support the district overall. And we've identified 750 available from that. Athletics of the 6 million, only 100,000. Support facilities, so not schools, of the 3.7 million budgeted, 900,000 remaining, and the bond premium, 4.9 million. And so it didn't turn out really good on this slide, and I apologize. Of the 33.3 million budgeted, we had X amount available, and I hope we can see that on the next slide. So next slide, please. Yeah, it's not showing up completely. If you go to the email that went out with the package of materials, that document is a PowerPoint and you can see everything. Basically, the available funds matches the priorities for reallocation. Okay, and so Hills Drive realignment. We were initially told back since 2012 from Parker and Douglas County that we would not have to realign Hills Drive. That guidance has changed from both land authorities based on now anticipated development east of Pine Drive. And we've briefed our leadership, and we really, we need to do this. They're the authority having jurisdiction. So we need to realign Hills Drive. So for the design and construction, an estimated 2 million. For Innovation Center contingency, we hope we don't need this. And if we don't, we're going to bring this back, or a portion, next year at this time, saying we have this contingency remaining that we identified. Now we'd like to use it for XYZ, hopefully more capital improvement projects, for example. And this is just contingency for future Town of Parker or Douglas County requirements, for partnerships that are being finalized for learning and equipment and materials and furnishings. Douglas County High Stadium, you'll see pictures of that later. That is early 1960s stadium. We've constructed Echo Park as part of the 2006 bond. We've done repairs to Shea Stadium, but this seating is definitely subpar, and it's on the verge of being a safety hazard. The additional Tier 1 and Tier 2 CIP projects, we've identified the most urgent next in the batch, 1.06 million. And then bond administration fees. The bulk here is that when we were working with Scott Smith at the time and leadership to identify what and how much we could get with 250 million, we were planning on hiring in-house project managers to manage the bond. That was not feasible. We couldn't afford it, and we weren't competitive in the market. So what we did, we went with an owner's rep firm. And I will say that NV5 not only is extremely qualified, but they were millions less expensive than the next on the list, owner's rep. The primary cost here is that with the 15% budget cuts last year because of COVID, we rolled in certain project managers and construction director into the bond. So these are those annual salary and benefits. So those are the primary reasons for that increase in administration fees. We're basically truing up the administration fees now that we're about halfway through the bond at this point. And then bond premium and contingency. This is, I think, Vanessa, you asked, or someone did, do we have contingency? This is just holding back some funds. So, you know, almost 600,000, and we think these are conservative numbers, safe. We're hoping that the needs for reallocation are less than this. These are worst case scenarios. Okay, next slide.
Yeah, Rich.
Yes.
One question there on that last slide.
Yeah.
I don't understand where the 1.7 million came from for the bleacher replacement. Well, if I look on the, again, I shouldn't do this, but if I look in the MCP, that project is in there for 74,200.
There was a different scope. This is, that's basically repairs. This is completely redoing the bleachers. Because as we've looked at this more and more, we don't think it's prudent. And we think with the available funds, we have an opportunity to bring the lower section of the bleachers up to par. The upper section's fine because that's a raised metal bleacher system, but not the lower portion. That's original concrete. That is, it's continuing to crack and exacerbate over the years with differential settlement and the freeze-thaw cycle.
Okay.
Thanks for the question. Here's Hills Drive realignment that Jessica's already provided. And so we were very disappointed that we had to do that. And we were not planning on doing that. And we have continued to update our leadership and board on this site and the challenges that we continue to overcome. And we are, but from annexation to rezoning, it is zoned used by right as public and private schools, but we're rezoning it to public facilities here because that actually assists our traffic impact study and our planning and our requirements. So there's the realignment of Hills Drive. Next slide. And again, you've seen these pictures. This is the alternative education facility that's on that site plan. And next slide. This is the innovation center. So that's one of the big items that we need to address. Next slide. This is the Douglas County bleachers. I took these pictures 2 weeks ago and just wanted to let you know, not only can you see the rebar, but this is going to get worse. This is a tripping hazard. And you can see on the right where the tilting, the retaining portion of that row is starting to bow out. So at some point it's going to fail. Next slide. Here's some other areas. So this is consistent throughout the bleacher system. And you could either overlay this and use this as a base, or you could demolish it and do a raised bleacher system. And again, it's only on the lower portion. So those are the bleachers that have been identified as the next most urgent priority. And one reason, probably in the past, the capital improvement plan had a certain approach on this is because the capital improvement plan is relatively new. Back in, as a matter of necessity, when our buildings became older and older, we created the capital improvement plan in the 2007-2008 timeframe. And it was also a plan that was focused on what available funds we had. Well, now because we have some opportunities, we want to fix this. And this will be for the next 50 years. It's going to be a permanent fix. Okay, next slide. This is additional Tier 1 and Tier 2 capital improvement, additional projects at schools. And you can see these are all mechanical, which is pretty consistent with Tier 1s. And these, as you can see, and we have Wayne Blazek, our facilities capital planner, on this call too. These are by system. Typically when a school by an age with a manufactured product becomes increasingly difficult to maintain, that they all hit at once. And this is what it's showing here. So boilers, mechanical chillers. Next slide. And again, I wish all of those would come out. Please look at the PowerPoint presentation on the link. I apologize for the Google format of the slide. And you've already discussed the bond language. And next slide. And this is the charge. You're intimately familiar with this. So I wanted to highlight that and see if you have any comments. And these are all CIP projects would be targeted for 22. Perhaps the bleachers in 22 would have to work around scheduling. The substantial portion of the bond will be completed in summer of 22. There would be remaining allocation to look at next year at this time based on actual costs for 23. And then the Pine Drive site is either January or August 23, depending on whether you're looking at the Innovation Center or the Alt Ed. So most of the bond's going to be done in 22. But so that's the time frame. We want to get going on this and then take the guaranteed maximum prices. And again, all the breakout is there in the contracts that go to the board. I mean, these are 40 to 50 page guaranteed maximum prices with all the breakout. But we would want to get these designed as soon as possible, and ideally around November, take contract prices to the board for 22. Now, is that achievable or not? Not in all cases. And we may do some owner-led projects here, go directly with trade contractors if possible, to expedite some of these because they are urgent.
This is Joe. Question on the Douglas County bleachers. I assume that all these changes will be ADA.
Yes.
So as far as railings and ramps and all that kind of good stuff that goes along with it.
Absolutely.
Okay, so that will take care of that.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah, anytime we do a significant project like this, or even an addition or remodel, we have to address all ADA requirements, as we should.
Any other questions for Rich?
Hey, Rich, this is Jim. So
yes.
I think back to the last meeting, and the principal from South was on, and she mentioned about how the rest, I think it was the bathrooms being redone was on the list originally, and then it was deleted off because there wasn't enough money to go around. So I look at some of these projects, and I guess it's tough for me because obviously I don't have the knowledge that you have, but I'm just trying to get my arms about who, how does the decision get made that South doesn't originally needed to upgrade their bathrooms, but then the decision was made they don't need to, but then we're adding these projects, seem to be pretty expensive, and I'm grasping at, that's not our ability, that's not our responsibility to make those decisions, but I guess I'm just questioning how that decision gets made. I know you've talked earlier about you made some decisions individually.
Right. So,
Rich, would you like me to take that?
Yeah, and thanks, Leila. And Jim, thanks for the question. And now when I say I make the decision, obviously we hire an owner's rep, architects, consultants, we delegate, but we approve the process and approve the recommendation on which tier ones and tier twos or portions of tier two. So every school, and Leila's going to chime in, our director of construction, on South in particular, but it is very common when we have the architect, their subconsultants, which are their engineers that work for the architect, the construction management general contractor, we have the school principal and a SAC representative, along with O&M to discuss work orders, maintainability, and our facilities capital planner, Wayne Blazik. And the school principal, Aaron, in this case for Southridge, now one of our directors of schools, fortunately, we're thrilled for her. But anyway, like Nikki at Thunder Ridge, they will go down and look at the most urgent flooring or partitions or countertops because they may want to use 50% funding tier two based on other impactful projects at that school. So the restrooms meet code, but they are hard to clean with the caulking. Some of the countertops may be cracked. Any fixture that needs replacing, is replaced by operations and maintenance or is maintained by O&M or replaced in the bond. Whereas any safety project is going to be done. And so the principals are part of that, as well as the SAC representative. And it will get down to the point of, I want to do one boys, one girls bathroom on the first floor and second floor at these entrances, or I want to do all of the floors in these areas, or I defer to you, which are the hardest to clean. Let's do that because there's not enough tier two money. There's only 50% of the money that we have for all of the tier two. So we either do certain projects or certain projects and portions of projects. And then on the stadium, it was really the impending safety issue that raised that. I will say, last year I took pictures and I did not see as much spalling of the concrete and chipping. And I know for a fact, Wayne Blazik, who's on this line, we were out there probably 2 months ago and I didn't see that huge piece of concrete down at the bottom of that step. That's a broken ankle waiting to happen. So it's the safety that made this an issue. For example, asphalt, concrete, and playgrounds are tier two. But unless it's a safety issue, it's probably not going to bubble up to something as important as restroom floors or carpet. or caulking of the concrete masonry units on the perimeter of the building. That's protection of assets. It's not going to close a building, but it will degrade it over time. So that urgency raises it. So Jim, I hope that answered it, but Leela's going to comment a few here.
Thank you, Rich. I just wanted to add, as far as the process, as all of you are aware of, we do not have sufficient funds to address all of the tier 2. The restrooms basically fall as tier 2. So what we did was the exact team that Rich just mentioned, between the architect, the contractor, the principal, a SAC representative, planning, O&M, and construction, we all met as a team. And the first meeting that we had, we just said, hey, okay, you have 10 items on this list. We know we're not going to be able to address all 10. So would you like to, we want to prioritize maybe the top 5 or something. And then we picked the top 5 that was selected by the team as a team. And that was where, the restroom floor for South, for example, came into play. And then we did the design of that, and the architect and the contractor did the preliminary pricing. And at the end of that, we went back to the same team, met together, and then said, hey, okay, based upon the pricing, we can't do all these 5, even the ones that we did highlight. We can only do 3. So which 3 do we want to do? Or which one would you like us to attack? And that was, again, a decision as a team, mostly coming from the principal and the SAC, because we were able to we were more flexible between the rest of us, I want to say. And that's where between these 5, I can't pick only 2 or 3. So, okay, now which can we pick and which we cannot pick? And that's where the restrooms probably got dropped off at South. And that's the process, not just for South, for every single school. That was our approach, because we knew we couldn't address every single tier 2 that we would like to have addressed. Hope that helps as to why South originally had restroom in the plan and then probably got dropped.
I think sometimes it gets confusing. I kind of thought tier 1 was a little bit more about urgency, need, as opposed to impact on the school. And I think I asked this once before, and this is still a little bit confusing, and it might be getting to what Jim's saying, is identifying the reallocation, identifying those schools for the next, for the extra money, sort of. How do you compare schools and compare projects to identify what to do next? Is that strictly from the CIP?
So Vanessa, it's from the CIP, and the CIP, Capital Improvement Plan, every item is ranked on a scale of 1 to 8,000. And we lump those as high, medium, and low. So a tier 1 high is a building component that can close a school that is the most urgent. And if you look in the master capital plan, there are 5 components that result in that rating: high, medium, or low. And then you have a tier 2, high, medium, and low, tier 3, high, medium, and low, tier 4, high, medium, and low. So there's 12 levels of urgencies. And it is very possible that you can have a tier 2 high that needs to be addressed faster than a tier 1 low, because the tier 1 low is not about to fail. Even though if it does fail, it'll close a building, but it's not that urgent. Whereas a tier 2, for example, those stadium bleachers, if it becomes a safety issue, it needs to be addressed. So I hope that answers your question.
I think so. And it was really more about the mechanical ones that you chose on there.
Yeah.
So those would be
all tier 1.
Tier 1 highs. The
Yes.
next, the next tier 1 highs.
Yes.
Thank you.
Not to wait for the next bond. It needs to be addressed now.
Okay, any other questions, comments for Rich or Leela? Okay, well, thank you, Rich and Leela, and also
Thank
Jessica. So we will move on to the update from the board liaisons.
Okay. Well, I'll just give you a summary update of we had a board meeting last night and have a work session tomorrow night. So last night, probably three main items just to talk about that were covered. First, in the superintendent reports, we talked about opening and the process of what next year will look like. So Superintendent Wise walked through that, laid down some foundation for that, talked about, what we're expecting to see and hopeful for. And so, again, this is an evolving thing over the next, few weeks as we head towards the year. I mean, certainly the district is targeting full opening, but there's, some things to work through before the year opens. So that was covered up front. The other thing that was a part of last night's meeting was several new cabinet folks hired. So Andy Abner and Danelle Hyatt as assistant superintendents were introduced, as well as Sid Rundle as part of the covering the SPED team. So that was pretty significant, very exciting to have them join the cabinet. And the last but not least, certainly that was covered in depth and also approved, was the budget going into next year. So Kate and team presented that and got approval from the board. So those were the big items that were covered last night. So if there were any questions or anything else you wanted to address, but that's our update.
Okay. Any questions, comments from our directors?
This is not MBOC related, but since we get the pleasure of having you sit through these meetings with us, do we think we'll have bus service fully reinstated without distance requirements next year?
I'll defer that one to Rich on that. Let him tackle that one.
Well, thanks for the great question. And I'm curious too, because I'm a parent of two in the district. And the communications for summer learning has gone out. We expect, as everyone, new public health orders to come out. And our superintendent continues to have active discussions with Dr. Douglas, Tri-County Health, who is our health authority on behalf of Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment. So our goal is normal. We're planning for that, and we'll continue to have discussions in concurrence with Tri-County Health on that.
Great, thanks, Rich.
Anything else on this topic? Okay, well, thank you, Director Graziano. Okay, so we will move on to the MBOC member forum. Does anyone have any questions, comments on non-agenda items? Okay, see, I do have a couple things. Rich, am I correct in believing that our next meeting will be in person?
That is our goal, pending public health orders. Absolutely. Our Board of Education is meeting in public, and effective 1 July, we're into a new school year. So our goal is to be in person. Yes.
Okay. Now that being said, because I'm very excited that we can get back to in person. That's wonderful. But that being said, if any member is uncomfortable meeting in person, then you are more than welcome then to call into the meeting and not be there in person. That's perfectly fine. Well, if you're not comfortable being there in person, no problem at all with you calling in. See, then the next item.
Can I add something there really quick too?
Sure.
We can also make sure that the Zoom links are available, just, whether it be discomfort or just one of the things that has come out of COVID is actually greater participation in some of our committee meetings, be it DAC, be it FOC, be it MBOC, be it whatever the committee might be. And so providing that opportunity for people to be able to join, I think is still important that we carry on. So we can make sure that those Zoom links are available, even if it's simply the commute time to get down to the boardroom so that people can still join.
Okay, well, I appreciate that. I wasn't going to answer that because I assumed that would include more staff then that would have to work. Because won't somebody have to be there to run that system?
We'll be able to tackle that. We'll do it simultaneously through the folks that are in person and joining virtually.
Okay, well, great. Well, thank you very much for that. I appreciate that. And then let's see, my next thing, well, see, I realize she's not here, but I wanted to thank Director Shunto Shore and also Rich for getting through an extension on the sunset date for the MBOC. We were going to sunset in December of 22, but it's fairly clear that the projects, are all not going to be done by then. So we'll definitely be going into 23. Now, Rich is and I realize this date will change. I get that. But if we tentatively tell the members that we would be asking them to serve like one additional year, through December of 23, is that a reasonable time frame to look at, or should we go further out and less out?
I think that's very reasonable, and thanks for asking. We could always adjust it up or back depending on the substantial completion of the bond. And we say substantial completion, that's a construction term. We hold funds for a year after a project is complete because of warranty. So we would recommend the MBOC in place for project completion, not for fiscal closeout, because otherwise you'd have another year on your charge. But unless Kate thinks otherwise, I know Kate monitors the draw schedule too, so she's good. So I think it's a good estimate at this point.
Okay, so if everybody can be planning on then, instead of serving through December of 22, if we can look at serving through December of 23. And definitely under that, I certainly hope that everyone would be able to continue serving for that additional year. But if you feel you can't, I would appreciate if you would reach out to me and let me know so we can discuss that. Because if someone can't continue to serve for that additional year, it might better serve the committee if you were to resign earlier, so then we could get you replaced. At some point in time, it's not going to be worth it to try to replace people. And so probably that final year, definitely the final 6 months, it just would not be worth it to try to bring somebody else on board. There'd be no way to get them up to speed before we actually sunset. So thank you very much for that. Let's see, I don't think we have anybody on here from the public. I'm not seeing anybody from there. So is there a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Greg with the first and Irene with the second.
Perfect.
Acceptable? Okay.
Thanks, everybody.
Aye.
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 Okay, we're adjourned. So
Thanks,
you very much.
everyone.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.